Hey, Definers, quick note that this episode is sponsored by Glad. Glad is a great example of a company making commitments and putting resources into increasing the recycled content and its products. Enjoy.
All right, Definers, welcome to episode 66 on recycled content. Jay and I are here defining sustainability one concept and one bad joke at a time. This is our latest topic, Jay, recycled content. We haven't done recycling before, and yet I work in this topic.
Right. And Scott, we're going to tease some of your expertise later on in this intro, but I know you're just chomping at the bit to get to this one.
No, I was excited about this topic. I mean, we did plastics, but we haven't done much really in the realm of recycling. So, Jay, let's get into the outline. What are we going to talk about?
Okay, we are going to ask a number of questions that we will sift through during the intro. Number one, what is recycled content? Number two, what is the environmental impact of using recycled content? Number three, how much recycled content is in various products? Number four, why is it hard to increase recycled content? 5, what companies have made commitments around recycled content? 6, what policies are in place to mandate or stimulate the use of recycled content? 7, how can Definers buy more recycled content and help increase the amount of recycled content in products? And then finally, we will segue into our expert interview with Nick Higgins, VP Commercial Lead for Glad brand. I'm excited. I know you're excited. Let's start off at square one, as we always do, by asking, what is recycled content?
Well, first, let me say, Jay, I like when you say the number, like at number 7. If I were a listener, I'd be like, oh my God, these guys are going to drone on forever. I actually commented to you before we started, like, I kept these ones relatively short.
Right. But Scott, we're here to break it down as black and white as possible. And we're laying it down. Definers are along for the ride.
Yeah. All right. So like you said, square one, what is recycled content? And I imagine some listeners, maybe you've picked up some packaging and you've seen on there, like, hey, this has X amount of recycled content, or we've increased our recycled content. So our hope is that after this episode, that number has a lot more context for you and that you likely won't look at packaging the same way again. So let's start with a definition, as we tend to do, Jay, and let's look at the International Organization for Standardization's definition, or ISO is what they are called. And ISO refers to recycled content as the proportion by mass of recycled material in a product or packaging. In other words, recycled content refers to the percent of recovered material in a product.
And now, let's note that recovered material typically takes 2 forms. Number 1, post-consumer material, and number 2, pre-consumer material. So, post-consumer refers to material that has been repurposed from items that consumers have put in the recycling. In contrast, pre-consumer refers to material that has never reached the end user and was diverted from the waste stream during a manufacturing process.
So a quick note on pre-consumer material. That does not include scrap generated during the production of the material. So, for example, let's say you're a steel producer and you have some steel scrap while producing that raw steel. When you put the steel scrap into the beginning of your steel production process, that wouldn't count because you're basically just taking it from one part of a facility and taking it into another. So let's use a simple example to review. Let's say you got a piece of copy paper. It's got 30% post-consumer, so that stuff that people have put in the recycling, and 10% pre-consumer content generated during the manufacturing process. That piece of paper would then have a total recycled content of 40%.
Do we know what Dunder Mifflin's recycling content was?
Why didn't they do an episode on that, Jay?
That would have been great.
And they could have, Dwight and Michael could have went around trying to find the source of it or something.
This is like that handle, what is it, where someone tweets, Seinfeld today or something, and it's like
right.
Seinfeld characters getting into shenanigans this day and age. If only Dunder Mifflin were still in operation today. Anyways, let's ask, where do we see recycled content today? Well, some of the most common products you can find that can be made with recycled content include the following: car bumpers, carpeting, cereal boxes, egg cartons, glass containers, laundry detergent bottles, nails, newspapers, and paper towels. So safe to say, a wide range.
I hadn't thought about nails before, but yeah, we're talking metal nails, not fingernails. By the way.
Right.
All right. So another quick note here, recycled content versus recyclability. So recycled content doesn't mean that package is recyclable. You could have a product that has 30% recycled material like your to-go container, but then maybe it's got a polyethylene layer that many recycling centers cannot accept or process, and then you've got a package that has recycled content but isn't recyclable. So those are two different things.
Yeah, there's always that kind of bummer moment, Scott, where you go to recycle something, but then you take a second look and you're like, oh my God, I think there's a plastic layer on this that is going to prevent this from being recycled, which is always kind of a bummer.
Right. And those to-go containers, I've seen those, right? We've got that sheen, that coating. Yeah.
So without getting too much further into the weeds, which I know we could certainly do, we want to note that the ISO definition is really just one approach. There are multiple accounting methods that people use for recycled content, as well as multiple recycled content standards, some of which are industry or material specific. For example, there is the recently released Recycled Material Standard that is the first to offer both average recycled content and mass balance allocation claims. So here in this episode, we're going to keep it simple and just talk about recycled content in terms of pre-consumer and post-consumer material in the finished product. If you want to dive deeper into the topic, we recommend checking out a recent report from Eunomia titled A Comparative Assessment of Standards and Certification Schemes for Verifying Recycled Content in Plastic Products. Of course, we'll link to it in the show notes, and you can always Google it to find it and locate that free download.
All right, Jay. So let's get into the importance of recycled content and its environmental impact. So using recycled content presents many benefits to our environment. And it makes sense, right? Because using recycled material means we're displacing or avoiding the use of virgin or new material. When we use recycled material, that means reducing landfill waste, reducing energy consumption, decreasing the extraction of finite resources, and extending the material's life cycle.
And so the question then, Scott, is how much of an impact does utilizing recycled content really have? Well, one example here is metal cans, which something tells me you are particularly fond of. Mm-hmm. When you make an aluminum beverage can with recycled material, it results in 80% less greenhouse gas emissions than if you made the can with virgin material. Similarly, with steel food cans, producing it with recycled steel entails 75% less greenhouse gas emissions than making a food can with virgin steel. So some pretty massive emission savings there.
Totally. And full disclosure that I do work for the metal can industry. And Jay, those stats sound much better coming out of your mouth. So well done.
Oh, if you need a new spokesperson, Scott, perhaps a guy that is not nearly as knowledgeable, let me know.
I'll let them know. So let's get one thing straight too, is that the creation of an item from recycled material, it does still entail greenhouse gas emissions, of course, right? But it essentially is always a net carbon savings when you consider the resulting avoidance or displacement of that virgin material in making the item. And it's also important to note that if you're comparing two different types of packaging, just saying, well, this one has higher recycled content, so it must have a lower carbon footprint, be better for the environment, that's not necessarily true. For example, a glass bottle, it may have higher recycled content than a plastic pouch, but because of the heavier weight of the glass bottle, it uses more virgin material overall, which may result in greater impact on emissions and resource depletion. So if you're comparing two products made of the exact same material, yeah, higher recycled content, likely lower environmental footprint. But just two random products, you can't just say higher recycled content means lower environmental impact. Mm-hmm. So, Jay, you rattled off the nails and the other products that have recycled content, but how much is actually in various products?
Well, to start off, Scott, let's go back to metal cans. And actually, I see this now as my second audition for your new spokesperson. So here we go.
Good luck.
Thank you. Note that the average aluminum beverage can manufactured in the U.S. is 73% recycled content. That compares to the average glass bottle having 23% recycled content and average plastic PET bottles containing only 6%. But remember our breakdown of pre-consumer and post-consumer material. That 73% average recycled content in U.S. beverage cans is not all used cans. It's actually 50% post-consumer material, and 23% pre-consumer material.
Now, more companies are starting to be transparent with exactly how much recycled content they use in their products. Several companies are reporting the recycled content they use in their plastic packaging through an initiative at the World Wildlife Fund called Resource Plastic. In the Transparent 2021 report released in December 2021, and this report is part of that Resource Plastic initiative, here's what some of the involved companies disclosed in that report. So Keurig Dr. Pepper says that the inputs in their plastic packaging are actually 98% virgin content and only 2% recycled content. Similarly, McDonald's says its plastic packaging inputs, 98% virgin content, 0.9% bio-based content, and 0.6% recycled content. Procter & Gamble, a little better, says its plastic packaging inputs are 90% virgin content and 10% recycled content. So in total, the use of recycled content among these resource principal members increased from 7.8% to 9.6%. That translates into using about 124,000 metric tons of plastic between 2018 and 2020.
Yeah, so that's not a great overall number, we know, but there should be some kudos to these companies for annually reporting publicly how much recycled content they are incorporating into their plastic products and using WWF's tools to try to improve the recycled content number. Paper products incorporate recycled content too. One example is newspaper. A 2019 UK survey found that newspapers there contain an average of 63.2% recycled content. I wonder if that survey was conducted online or via paper. And then looking more generally, and here in the US, 42.6% of the fiber consumed in the manufacture of new paper and paperboard in 2020 was recovered fiber. The paper industry has a goal to get that up to 50% by 2030 as a part of its Better Places, Better Planet 2030 Sustainable Products for a Sustainable Future initiative.
So, Jay, I imagine some definers out there are like, cool info, guys. You gave me some industry general ones. You gave me some brand general ones, but like how much recycled content is in my packages that I'm buying? Mm-hmm. Well, it is important to note that some are industry reported averages and others, this is important, are third-party verified and give the exact amount of recycled content in the package you bought. So the granularity of the recycled content information and the level of verification, they're both something to consider when you're looking at recycled content information, just to see what companies are reporting, as well as just the packaging you're buying. So sometimes it isn't available. Sometimes you just have these industry reported numbers.
Right. But Scott, let me take us to our next subheader here and ask, why is it hard to increase recycled content? So help educate us.
Sure. Yeah. So we mentioned, Jay, that plastic PET bottles, they've got 6% recycled content. Now, let's say we wanted to get that number up to 25%, all right? Just to have the amount of material needed to get to 25% recycled content, every American would need to recycle 100 additional PET bottles each year. Now, that amount of material accounts for the fact that 1/3 of PET is lost during the mechanical recycling process. So you also have to consider the losses in the recycling process when you're thinking about how much material is needed to get to certain recycled content numbers. So you might be saying 100 additional PET bottles, I guess that's a lot. And I think it is, right? That's a lot of additional recycling per person.
For sure.
Yeah, right. And you also have to think about that some people, they don't have recycling access. 6% of Americans don't have any at all. And only a little more than half have that automatic curbside that's seen as kind of the highest level of recycling access you can have. Right. So this is an issue, that's a supply issue.
Right. And Scott, just the 6% of American households with no recycling access means a loss of 280 million pounds of PET each year. So that little percentage has huge impact. And then you move on and you say, well, the typical 70% of people that don't sign up for subscription-based curbside recycling service in the areas where it's offered in the U.S. represents another annual loss of 660 million pounds of PET to disposal. So we're talking real quantities here. Right.
And some people might be listening and say, what are you talking about subscription-based curbside? Well, there's plenty of communities around the country where you have to pay extra and opt in. I think I've grown up and live in a place right now in D.C. where it's automatic. But in a lot of places, it's not. I don't know, Jay, have you ever lived anywhere where it's subscription-based?
Fortunately, no, Scott. But I think it's a luxury that you come to recognize you have when you do live in those cities, right?
Totally. Like Indianapolis, example of a big city where currently it's subscription-based curbside, if you can believe it.
Yeah, man.
So a related challenge to there not being enough supply is that there is competition for the recycled material that is available. So let's stick with the PET. And there are other significant end markets for that recycled PET, or rPET as some in the industry call it, besides PET bottles. The other industries that want that rPET are t-shirts and carpet. And as the t-shirt companies and carpet companies buy up recycled PET material to put into their products, that means less is available for the PET bottle manufacturers.
Another issue can be that sometimes you can't easily take a package made of a material and recycle it into a product of the same material. This often arises with different colored packaging. Coca-Cola recognized this issue when it decided to make its Sprite bottles clear instead of green. It said the green bottles are technically recyclable, but the coloration makes it difficult to reuse the material in the form of high-quality, food-grade recycled PET. In contrast, some products made of a certain material can be easily made into any other kind of product. This is the case with steel, which we touched on earlier. For example, the steel in food cans is easily able to be recycled into any other steel product, such as cars or bridges. So Scott, maybe if you squint hard enough at the Golden Gate Bridge, you'll see one of your last used can of Bush's beans somewhere in there.
You know, it's funny you bring up Bush's beans. So I recently took a road trip where we passed the Bush's beans factory. And I was upset that I didn't have time to stop off and check it out, but I want to do that at some point.
And of course, there's a visitor center and all the kind of trinkets you can walk out with.
Of course there
commemorating your trip to the Bush Beans manufactory.
It's like I grew up in Chicago, and I remember passing the Jelly Belly factory. Which I never got a chance to check out, but I wish I did.
Nice.
All right, so maybe you caught just a bit ago the mention from Coke about its switch from green to clear PET because it wanted to be able to create food-grade material. Well, there's a limitation in not being able to freely use recycled material for food contact packaging. Companies that wish to use recycled plastic for a food contact application, they have to submit information to and receive approval from the Food and Drug Administration in the US and European Food Safety Authority in Europe. While this is important to protect human safety, it does create a barrier and it can restrict the supply of the kind of recycled material available needed for certain products.
Reduction in quality or appearance can also hinder the greater use of recycled material. Consider another kind of plastic, HDPE. It's often used in milk jugs and laundry detergents. While recycled HDPE is widely used, its use suffers from performance and aesthetic issues, notably reduced stress crack resistance, visible imperfections, and difficulty achieving a bright white appearance.
You got to have that bright white appearance, Jay.
If you ain't got it, we ain't buying it.
And then some materials or packaging simply have a maximum due to technological or other limitations. So steel food cans, they have up to 35% recycled content because with the basic oxygen process used to make the steel tinplate for cans, higher levels of recycled content would actually create a more inefficient process.
Almost counterintuitive.
It is a little counterintuitive. This is another thing where we get super in the weeds on it. The Sustainable Packaging Coalition has a design for recycled content guide. It's at recycledcontent.org. They do a nice job of explaining why there is this technological limitation. So encourage people to check that out.
Excellent.
For steel, they cover all the materials, so it's a really useful resource.
Awesome. Okay, Scott, next question. What companies have made commitments around recycled content? So as the push from policymakers and consumers for more recycled content continues to increase, many companies have made commitments to include higher percentages of recycled content in their products. For example, the quote activators of the U.S. Plastics Pact have collectively committed to several goals, including one which states, by 2025, the average recycled content or responsibly sourced bio-based content in plastic packaging will be 30%. The Clorox Company, which is the parent company of Glad, sponsor of this episode, is one of the U.S. Plastics Pact activators. Scott, I dare you to say Plastics Pact 4 times fast.
Jay, I hope you're using your pop filter.
My goodness. Thank God for these. Otherwise, listeners would be like, oh my God, I can't listen to these guys anymore.
So, Jay, you just mentioned the U.S. Plastics Pact, and there's a lot of companies sign on to that, like the Clorox company. But let's dive into some more company-specific goals, right? So one is Coca-Cola. They said that they will use at least 50% recycled material across all of its packaging by 2030. Colgate-Palmolive has a 2025 goal to increase post-consumer recycled content for plastic to 25%. Kroger says its product portfolio will collectively contain at least 10% recycled content in packaging by 2030. And Jay, with Kroger, I mean, that's one that maybe a lot of people don't think about is that companies like Kroger, they have their private label brands, and they actually control things like their packaging and such. So it's important to get commitments from them too, and not just the brands like Coke and stuff.
Exactly.
PepsiCo says it will use at least 50% recycled content in its plastic packaging by 2030. And last one, S.C. Johnson says it will triple the amount of post-consumer recycled plastic content in its packaging by 2025.
Importantly, these company goals differ on if they only apply to certain materials, if they are percentage increases in recycled content, or hitting certain amounts of recycled content, and of course in their deadlines. If you want to see other company-specific goals, check out the Sustainable Packaging Coalition's goals database, where you can filter for just the ones related to recycled content. And then, of course, seeing who is not on this list could be a good way to get a sense of who hasn't made commitments around recycled content as you are making your purchasing decisions.
And Jay, we've got to talk policy. You can't not talk policy.
Oh, this is where it gets good, Scott.
All right. So what policies are in place to mandate or stimulate the use of recycled content? Well, we've outlined the commitments that companies have voluntarily made. But sometimes you need that extra push there, Jay. And there are legislative mandates out there to use certain amounts of recycled content or that create incentives to use recycled content. So one such mandate is in New Jersey. A bill was signed into law in January 2022 requiring that the percentage of post-consumer recycled content increase gradually to up to 50% in a variety of packaging products, including plastic containers, plastic and paper bags, plastic trash bags, and glass containers.
There are other recycled content mandates in California and Washington. A California law that took effect January 1 of 2022 requires that plastic beverage containers subject to that state's beverage container deposit return system must include at least 15% recycled content. The amount of required recycled content increases to 25% in 2025 and to 50% in 2030.
And that's not little, Jay, right? I mean, we talked about how much material will be needed in general just to get up to 25% recycled content. And here you've got California, big old state, saying you got to get to 50% in 2030. That's going to be tough.
Right. So you're saying we're making you double your recycled percentage in 5 years. That's definitely a tall order.
Well, they're saying, yeah, but they still got to get to that 25. They're not even there now, right? They're saying you got to get 15% right now.
Right. So that's California, Scott. We also have Washington State, which enacted a law in 2021 that requires more recycled content in plastic beverage containers, trash bags, and containers for household and personal care products. The requirements vary, but to give one example, manufacturers of plastic trash bags will have to meet a 10% recycled content benchmark by 2023 and eventually use 20% by 2027. So we'll be talking more about trash bags in our expert interview coming up in just a little bit.
So if you want to dive more into recycled content mandates, consider checking out the January 2022 webinar from Northeast Recycling Council titled Recycled Content Mandates, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which, I appreciate when people get creative with their webinar titles. Have a little fun with these things.
You got to.
Right. So we'll link in our show notes to a resource recycling article that provides a nice recap of what the experts shared during the webinar, and we'll also link to the whole thing if you want to check it out. At the federal level now, in the United States, there is no recycled content mandate, although agencies are required to purchase items in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Comprehensive Procurement Guidelines Program to the fullest extent practicable. Items in these guidelines have been designated as ones that are or can be produced with recovered materials. All right, Jay, hopefully we've convinced people this is important. Hopefully people have a sense of the reality of recycled content, which in many products is pretty darn low. So how can people buy more recycled content and help increase the amount of recycled content in products?
Right. So the first thing to do is to look to see if the companies offering you a product you want are stating how much recycled content is in the product. We discussed that there are varying strengths of these claims, but when choosing between products made of the same material, go for the one with higher recycled content.
You can also tell companies that you want them to make recycled content commitments or that you want them to make more ambitious ones. These sorts of commitments are important since they send a market signal that if recycled material is collected and offered for sale, there will be ready buyers. In other words, recycled content commitments tend to lead to greater investments in recycling infrastructure.
And then lastly, of course, is to recycle the products that are recyclable and accepted in your local recycling program. So that, of course, provides the material needed for manufacturers to create new products with recycled material.
All right, Jay, we're going to get into the interview portion of the episode now with Nick Higgins, Vice President, Commercial Lead for the Glad brand. Nick has 17 years experience in large, like Procter & Gamble, and mid-size, like the Clorox Company, consumer packaging goods brands. He helps build these brands, and he's led businesses across male grooming, female beauty, home care, and corporate capabilities. But for the purposes of this interview, we're going to focus on the Glad brand and their efforts to increase recycled content in their trash bags. So let's get talking to Nick.
Here we go.
All right, everybody, welcome to the interview portion of our recycled content episode. We've got Nick Higgins, VP Commercial Lead for Glad brand, all the way from San Francisco. Presumably, Nick, you maybe just had a super burrito in the Mission right before this interview. That's what I would do.
You know it well.
But we want to talk sustainability, of course. So, Nick, tell us about how you got interested in the field of sustainability. I mean, you've had quite a career at Glad and otherwise. So can you just walk us through your background?
Absolutely. Jay and Scott, thank you for having me. It's great that we're able to tell our brand story for Glad. And it's interesting, growing up, it's just was always told to me recycling is the right thing to do. Water's wet, and if you recycle, then it'll be better for the world. It's better for the environment. And I'll never forget, there was a picture of a bird that had a plastic six-pack wrapped around its neck. And one of the first lessons of recycling I had was anytime we would get a product in the house, we would always cut those plastic rings.
Yeah.
So if they did end up somewhere they weren't supposed to, it wouldn't harm wildlife. And to this day, it's an automatic habit I have. If I get something with that at home, it's not even thinking about it. So pictures can be very impactful in learning those type of lessons of how to help be a better citizen of the world and the environment. Those stayed with me throughout the years. And then working in business for the past 18 years, companies have had a lot more public and internal emphasis on sustainability. It's the way that they want to act in the world. It's what consumers want and expect of products and manufacturers. So that's led to our focus on Glad and what we're here to talk today. It's interesting because having a brand that primarily sells trash bags talk about sustainability can be a bit of a cognitive dissonance. It just might not make sense. But we know it's our responsibility as a manufacturer to take on the world's problems and see if we can solve them while still giving consumers a quality product. And I'm sure that's what we'll get into today.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that image really stuck with you. I feel like a lot of people have that story, whether they saw something in a magazine or a picture like you saw, or like firsthand, or even just being in a national park, right? So thanks for sharing that. And I guess if you could, you touched on it a bit about Glad focusing more on recycled content. Can you tell us, like, how did that happen internally? Were you guys, like you're saying, this is just what companies focus on, and we make trash bags, and we can reduce the environmental footprint of those bags by incorporating more recycled content. So let's get on it. I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, I'll take you through a little bit of the brand's history, which has kind of led us to where we are today. So the Glad Products Company has been around since 1968, and the brand has always prided itself on providing innovation to meet changing consumer needs. So if you can imagine the drawstring on trash bags, which is now something that we take for granted, they replaced the quick tie, and even before that, those little yellow zip ties that you would put on the top of a trash bag. And then things like a trash bag that grips the top of your garbage can so it doesn't fall in every time you throw something in. Or our Force Flex, which is a flexible plastic. So if you put something sharp in, the bag won't automatically rip. Or even things like odor neutralization, which is kind of our newest benefit space. We have a really large R&D department of great people and innovators looking to see what can we deliver on Glad that meets the changing consumer needs. Collectively, they have over 1,000 years of innovation experience. So this is a very good group of people to be solving consumer problems. And recently, overwhelmingly, we've heard consumers prefer sustainability and sustainable benefits almost as much as the basic entry benefits, like trash bags. Mm-hmm. Something like sustainability benefits are almost as important as strength or not ripping or not leaking. So that consumer trend has urged us in this way, along with our company's just corporate responsibility of doing the right thing, to focus on this area specifically on what can we do moving forward to make our products of the same best quality that we have for Glad, but also with the least environmental impact. And that's our goal going forward now.
And so, Nick, we're talking about all these different initiatives that Glad is bringing to its products. My first question for you, as we're talking about trash bags specifically, is how much does incorporating recycled material reduce the carbon footprint and other impacts from Glad's garbage bags themselves?
Right. We did a life cycle analysis to see of all the cradle to grave aspects of a trash bag, where is the most greenhouse gas emitted? And overwhelmingly, 75% is between manufacturing and raw materials. So those are things that we can control as the manufacturer. And by far, the largest piece of that is raw materials. And so looking at how can we use less material and how can we use a material with less of an impact are two of the ways that we're looking at material usage. The third is how can we just make our products better? And we have programs and goals on each of those three areas that I can talk more about later. But to your question about what is post-consumer recycled plastic, how does that impact change versus virgin resin? When replacing a pound of virgin plastic with a pound of post-consumer recycled plastic, the carbon footprint from the raw material is reduced by approximately 70%.
Wow.
That's pretty substantial and more than I would have thought.
And so, I imagine that LCA, was that something Glad did internally, you said?
There are public ones available, but we did conduct our own to make sure that all the numbers aligned with where we could focus on our business.
So, Nick, I know you said that you all did this life cycle analysis and you saw that looking at manufacturing raw materials was the place to focus. But I'm wondering, is everyone sort of doing that and trying to increase their recycled content? Or is what you all are doing around recycled content really a differentiator for you? Could you talk about how your work in this compares to some of your competitors?
Everyone hopefully is engaged in making their products with less of an impact. I'd say given our proprietary technology platform, which we launched a few years ago, we are leading in this space. So we have developed a platform that enables us to use less raw material. So on average, we use 7 to 22% less plastic than the leading competitors for us. And so using less raw material has less of an impact. If you can liken it to other categories, think about down jackets 10 years ago. If you wanted a warmer jacket, it would probably be larger and puffier. Versus now with the microfiber, thinner jackets can provide just the same, if not more warmth. You could also think of cell phones 10 plus years ago or TVs 10 plus years ago. Today, you have a lot less raw material in those electronics while providing better end user benefits. So we took that same challenge of how can we use less raw material and still provide great quality bags that have the same, if not better, rip, leak, odor, and strength protections. So that's what enables us to be the leader in this space today.
No, I mean, it's impressive that you did that LCA and that you've taken that on and become the leader. And I guess some definers might say, that is great, right? And like I'm saying, but they also might be saying, but this is still something that goes, it collects my trash, but also ends up put in the trash receptacle to eventually be taken to the landfill. So how much of an impact does this really make? I mean, what do you say to those who say, well, I love the recycled content work you're doing, but doesn't the trash bag still just end up in the landfill?
It does. There's no denying that. I remember this marketing campaign by a headache medicine years ago, and they provided tips and tricks of how to get less headaches. Drink 8 fluid ounces of water multiple times a day, get a full night's rest. And they always ended it with, but for the headaches you do have, use this headache medicine. And I feel like that's our similar type of approach on Glad. We want to divert recycled waste. We want people to compost at home. But for the waste that still goes to landfill, we want to give you a product of high quality with the least environmental impact to do so. So in the United States, there's 20,000 municipalities. And I don't believe bag-based systems are going to change rapidly until we have infrastructure change here in the U.S. that enables some waste that ultimately ends up in landfills. So while we hope recycling and composting at home increase a lot, we know that there's still a waste stream that's going to end up in landfills, and we want to provide a bag with the least environmental impact for consumers to use to take care of that waste.
No, I mean, it makes sense. It's a necessary thing that we're using right now, and like you said, hopefully maybe we can use a bit less of it, but while we do need to use it, it makes sense to try to incorporate more recycled content.
And Nick, I do want to transition just slightly from that topic and bring us back to this idea of virgin materials that Glad is using. So we know that Glad has a goal of a 50% reduction in virgin materials by 2030 in its trash bags, and has achieved a 13% reduction in virgin material as of the calendar year 2020. So good progress, still a good amount to go. I'm curious, what gives you hope for making significant progress in the coming years to achieve that 50% goal?
I think a lot of the things that we're going to say today are that we're on a journey, and we have an industry around us that also have a number of key players that have publicly stated sustainability goals. So I feel working with our material suppliers, working with people that have processing capabilities of how they could better clean and make higher quality post-consumer recycled plastic available to us. And then even industry partners like our retailers or other adjacent industries that have a lot of plastic waste that move through their systems, how could we have some type of relationship where we get that access to that plastic and then turn it back into a trash bag? So I'd say we can't do it alone. And luckily that there's a lot of people trying to figure out the same problem. And hopefully we can have an integrated supply chain where this can be an unlock for many people.
Right. And again, Nick, you're spoon feeding me like the next segues to our next question. So fantastic. This cannot be your first. But I do want to continue on that topic of product innovation, right? You know, we've achieved the success that we have thus far, but there's still more to come. But now under this product innovation lens, in 2021, Glad launched its most sustainable trash bag, which is called Glad's ForceFlex Plus, which had 50% recovered plastic trash bags. Now, we know this was achieved by using 20% post-consumer recycled plastic and 30% reclaimed plastic, while still providing the strength people need for it not to break and have to use yet another trash bag, and let alone all the mess that comes with a broken trash bag, which everyone probably knows far too well. So question for you, Nick, is can you talk to us about the innovation that was required to incorporate that amount of recycled and reclaimed plastic in the trash bag? And perhaps an answer, why is it more difficult to use recycled material versus virgin material in the first place?
Sure. It's one of those things where we wanted to provide the consumer a high quality product with our best capabilities of sustainability. So for us at this point, if you use those filters of how you manufacture the product, what we've done in our manufacturing to make our processes as sustainable as possible, starting with our North American plants have been certified as zero waste to landfill manufacturing plants, and they use 100% renewable energy. So that starts our manufacturing process by lessening our environmental impact with some things that we can control. Then we use our proprietary platform where we use 2 thin layers, lightly laminated together, to make a bonded bag that still has the same performance of rips and tears while giving consumers less of an impact. So if you just stop there, using less plastic and manufacturing our products better, if people just chose Glad our kitchen drawstring bags, if everyone chose to use Glad kitchen drawstring, we would save 100 million pounds of plastic from going to landfill every year, just because our proprietary system uses less plastic.
It's a great stat.
But we didn't want to stop there. We wanted to use better types of materials. So to your point, we looked to see how much post-consumer recycled material could we integrate into our bag to lessen that overall impact, knowing that post-consumer recycled plastics have significantly less than virgin plastics greenhouse gases we just talked about before.
Right.
So because we have those two layers, we're able to use properties of one layer with more post-consumer recycled plastics and one with less to still give good performance. And then we look to see how much of reclaimed plastic from our own supply chain could we put back into our bags to get us to that 50% overall recovered plastics. So it was just a start. We eventually want to integrate more and more post-consumer recycled plastics, but we wanted to incorporate our product platform with manufacturing best practices with better for the environment materials, and that's what culminated in that overall product. Now, to your question about what makes it difficult to use post-consumer recycled plastics, it's just very difficult to get a clean stream back into our manufacturing process. You've probably seen a lot of bales of plastic. If you drive down the highway, you can see sometimes trucks with bales of plastic, and there's a lot of contaminants in there. Paper labels, different types of plastic bags, different colors of plastic bags. So there has to be a good process of getting that and then cleaning it so we can get a good high quality plastic to make our bags with the same performance, because we know you cannot sacrifice performance if you want people to continually choose a more sustainable offering. So it's all about that right balance of getting a clean stream back and then making a good high performance bag.
And Nick, I think that's an interesting point. It's one we touched on in the intro too, which is, to many folks, myself included, probably before really diving into this topic, you think, well, plastic's plastic. You can just recycle it, right? And maybe there aren't too many other considerations beyond that. But the example we touched on in the intro was, even Coke, which is trying to come up with a better way to recycle its plastic bottles, said, well, color matters, right? We have to make the choice to have all of our Sprite bottles be transparent and not green for the reason you're talking about. And when I say green, I mean the color green, simply because you're, at the end, if you're dealing with different colors of what you would think would be the same material, it just adds that much more complication to the whole thing.
That's exactly right. I feel for us, we can get over the color piece a lot easier than other products because we do have those dual layers. So if you look at most of our kitchen trash bags today, the inside layer is black or dark. And then we could use a white or lighter film. So then the outside of the bag looks like a gray or stainless steel, but the inside of the bag is black. And then a black plastic film can incorporate a lot of different colors in it because you don't have to worry about the aesthetics. For us, it's more problematic on the types of plastic. So to your point, and I'm sure everyone's seen these on different bottles, there's PET or polyethylene or
the resin codes. Yeah.
You got it. So there's a lot of different types. And for us to get consistency, especially as we're dealing with thin films, we need the right grade of plastic to go through our manufacturing process to make the high quality bag that we want. So we're pretty narrow on the types of plastic that we can accept, but we do have a wider ability because of our two layers of the color of plastic.
And is there like a upper limit of sorts? It sounds like if you use the recycled content, like is it a matter of it's hard technically to incorporate it, or it's just the reality with recycled content that when you use it, it has less strength than that first virgin use of a plastic, so we can only go so high?
Yes. So to answer the question, both are true right now. It's the availability of a consistent amount of high quality post-consumer recycled material. That is something that's a bit of a bottleneck, but again, working with suppliers, we hope to open up that stream for us at a larger way in the future. And then the amount of plastic that you can use, just given the different properties of it, is difficult. It's a limiter depending on how you manufacture your products.
Okay. And so you talked about the supply of material being an issue. So one, I want to know if you're concerned about if you're going to be able to meet your goals given that issue, but more generally, I want to know, in terms of getting the plastic that you need, like, what is it? Is it, like, I know you mentioned the partnership with Recyclops. Is it just getting recycling access to new homes that don't have automatic curbside or don't have recycling service at all? Or is it the homes that already have recycling? We got to work on reducing contamination so that that material is cleaner and we can use it. It's probably on all of the above, I'm guessing, is part of your answer. But if you could just, if you did that life cycle analysis, right, to identify what were the parts of your process that were what you needed to tackle, have you done a similar analysis here of, well, shoot, where are we going to get all this material we need to meet our goals? We've identified that getting recycling where it doesn't exist is where we need to focus our time.
So in short, the answer is we need an intervention in the supply chain. We need something to change that enables a lot more post-consumer recycled plastics to be available. We are approaching that a few different ways. One, with our raw material suppliers that we have today. I feel they also want to increase recycled content going out, again, just because it's the right thing to do, and the amount of greenhouse gases that are saved by incorporating recycled materials into products, it's so significant. You have a lot of players in the supply chain also wanting to have this ability open up for them.
And by raw material suppliers, Nick, you mean the people that make the plastic that you turn into trash bags?
Exactly.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
Exactly. So our current plastic providers today, so can they give us high quality post-consumer recycled plastics? That's the biggest, probably easiest to unlock if we were just to keep our current supply chain and just be able to have access to more high quality recycled plastics. The second one is, how do we help get a large amount of clean post-consumer recycled film to our suppliers? So can we unlock that from an industry standpoint? And I feel like that's going to require a lot of different industries coming together. If you think about our retailers, if you think about the automotive industry, there's a lot of film wrap that is existing in the market today that if we were able to bring that film wrap to our current suppliers, they would be able to turn those into resin pellets and us being able to make those into trash bags. So the first one is working with our current suppliers. The second one is setting up new partnerships in our industry to get more clean film.
And so plastic, and just quickly, that the second one, so plastic film, are you referring to like what kind of, give people an example of a product that has plastic film that could go into a trash bag?
If you walk through retail stores and have seen pallet wrap, that clean pallet wrap that has products, that is a really good source of clean recyclable plastic for us. Or if in the automotive industry, cars come in wraps or certain parts come in plastic wraps. That plastic is very similar to the type of plastic we need to make our trash bag. So just getting that back cleanly is a way for us to unlock new raw materials going into the supply chain.
Is it not common practice for retailers and car dealerships, I guess, to recycle that wrap?
They do. A lot of it makes it into different industries, though. Decking, for one, is more using a term I'm sure you know a lot more than I do, but more downcycling than upcycling, of putting it into an industry as a one-time event versus giving it to us that we can continually use in our products to lessen the number of raw materials that we would need in terms of plastic. So it is going somewhere today. They are definitely responsibly disposing of it today, but we feel if it comes to us, we'd be able to do something that has greater value in terms of consistently using that in new products.
And then I know I'm interrupting your answer here, but I think one thing we forgot to ask was what other kinds of plastic can go into trash bags? So we've hit plastic film. Could it even be like the plastic bags you get at the grocery store and people return to the retailer, that kind of plastic? What else can go in there?
Yeah, unfortunately, the plastic bags that retailers use today aren't the same type of plastic that we use. It's more of a thinner plastic, and the properties don't hold up as well to rips and tears. But if you look at what Recyclops is doing and what we feel would be a really good system of using bags to transport products to recycling facilities or material recovery facilities. Most people think of them as junkyards, but the processing of landfills. If we could find a way to, once the bag delivers the garbage to the landfill or the recycling facility, to get those bags back So to get our own bags back, that by far gives us the high quality plastics in a way that would be very easy for us to return those into plastic bags. So using a partner like Recyclops that already has that infrastructure today, I feel that's another way for us to unlock the material availability of the type of plastic that we can turn into a trash bag pretty easily.
That's an interesting one, because I know one of the main things that are told to people when they're doing their recycling, don't bag the recyclables. Some people do. And some of these material recovery facilities that you mentioned that sort the single stream recyclables to then be sold, they have, I guess, what are called bag breakers, where they break open the bags of the ones that people did put in there when they weren't supposed to. And then, I haven't thought about what happens to those bags, right, that they've broken open. I would think that they would recycle them, but that would be another one. So I know I interrupted you. So you said work with your existing supply chain to get more plastic in there, increase access to certain kinds of plastic. I think that was number 2. Was there a 3?
That was the Recyclops idea of being able to get back the bags that we have already put out in the market and clean them and make them into bags again. And there's probably other startups in the industry that still have these types of capabilities. And like I said, we know we can't do this alone. So we are very open to working with like-minded individuals, companies, organizations that have the same goal.
Well, and Nick, here you go again, a perfect morsel to our next question. So I'm thinking now about the future of Glad's trash bags, of recycled content and plastics, etc. When you go about partnering with groups like Recyclops, which is probably one of the most epic names in recycling I've come across, what types of new frontiers perhaps are you uncovering with these groups you're partnering with?
It's more so about how do we disrupt the current system that we have in terms of creating an intervention that gets us more materials. It's going to be very difficult to change consumer behavior. I've worked in a number of categories, everything from beauty care to cleaning to now waste management. Mm-hmm. And then the hardest thing it is to do from a business is ask people to do something differently without giving them a very tangible benefit of, as they've changed, their behavior, what reward do they get? So we are taking it on ourselves, as I think manufacturers and businesses should, on how can we make our products better? How can we design a system that enables the consumers to make little, if any, habit changes, maybe just choosing a new product, but still make an impact? And I think everyone would want to do that, but we have to take the first step. So I feel those new types of partnerships that disrupt our industry are things that we can, as a company in this business, take the lead on and see how could we set up our system differently to make better product and make a better outcome.
Do you have any examples of perhaps these new ideas for disruption that perhaps Glad didn't even necessarily incorporate, but that you saw and thought, wow, that is a very interesting way to try to disrupt the system we were also used to?
I'd say we have a couple things in the work. They're probably a little too early for me to share right now, but the number one public one that we have, and I know I've said it a few times, is this partnership with Recyclops.
Okay.
It enables us to expand recycling. So you're doing good by getting more cities access to recycling. Our goal together, and I haven't said this yet, but our goal together is to extend recycling availability to over 1,000 new cities in the U.S. in 3 years. So it's going to make a meaningful impact. And so partnerships like that, I feel, would be the disruptor at such a scale that we could then do something differently on our end and make our products better.
Excellent. Well, and to be honest, you wrap your head around how much potential recycled content adding in an additional 1,000 cities would bring into the stream. And that's pretty substantial stuff.
It can be impactful.
Yeah. And so, Nick, perhaps some of the stuff that Glad's working on is still behind the veil, but what can consumers expect to see from Glad in the future in terms of incorporating more recycled material that's perhaps more ready to put to press?
We are going to be on a journey, and we want to be transparent about where we are, what our goals are. I've always heard a goal without a plan is hope, and hope is not a strategy. So we are going to be very transparent with where we want to go and where we are. And so in the not too distant future, you're going to start to hear us in a very large way start this conversation that we are having today. And again, it's very hard for people to wrap their heads around of, wait a second, you're a trash bag and you want to be sustainable, or you have a better environmental impact. So it's a very complicated conversation, but we know we need to start it. And we are. We have creative partners and agencies. FCB has been a wonderful creative agency in this, of how can we help tell our story in a very authentic way, in a very realistic way, in a believable way. So you'll see a commitment for us getting an understanding about how you could make different choices and have a better impact on the environment in the short term. I'd say in the long term, you'll have our commitment that we are going to work differently with our partners in our supply chain, in our retail landscape, to unlock this raw material that can make an impact of pretty substantial scale on reducing greenhouse gas in the industry. So short term, it's going to be more consumer education and products like our 50% recovered plastic products, making those available, telling people how just buying Glad today will make a big difference, that, saving 100 million pounds of plastic from going to the landfill if everyone used Glad drawstring trash bags. I mean, things that people can do today can make an impact, and then we are going to do the heavy lifting to unlock larger impacts and better material availability going forward.
I'm just going to jump in and say, Nick, I'm jealous of that stat you can provide, which says, if folks use this much exclusively Glad product, we would save this much amount from landfill. And Scott, I wish we had the same claim, right? We say, listeners, if everyone just listened to us, like this measurable impact would happen. I don't think we're there yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah, our research and development department did a great job quantifying for us what that impact is. And once we heard the number, we recalculated it a couple times because it's huge.
Yeah, Jay, we'll have to get our R&D department on that. But I am wondering, Nick, what is that compared against? Is it like a bag that has 0% recycled content, or?
No, it's just weight of plastic. So if you think about the weight of our bags versus the weight of our competitive bags, if you look at our kitchen drawstring bags, that's where the difference comes in. We use less plastic, and it makes a big deal. If you think about how many trash bags are used a day, a week, a year, that adds up pretty quickly.
And the competitors, do they have the 2 layers, or some don't, and yet you're still using less plastic?
No one else has our 2-layer proprietary system. So no one that we know of today can go as low as we can in terms of the overall plastic that we put in our products, while still giving consumers the high quality experience that they expect from trash bags. Okay, well,
I think, Jay, that we need to move into our final question here. So, Nick, we always do a party fact question, and I'm thinking, how do I set this up? I mean, I think, let's say we're at the grocery store and we're choosing the Glad Force Flex, and someone else is there and they're wondering what trash bag to buy. And then, of course, as one does in the grocery store, you start talking trash bags. And we want
I may or may not have done that many times.
Oh, I would be surprised if you hadn't. So can you tell us, Nick, let's say we are having that conversation and we want to talk about recycled content in trash bags. What would be like a stunning fact that we could tell this person such that they would drop their groceries they have in their hand?
I would just go up to them and say, do you know that if everyone bought Glad, we would save 100 million pounds of plastic from going to landfill every year? So just your easy decision could be the first domino that falls that could make a large impact.
And by everyone, it's like American households, or?
Every U.S. household, if they bought Glad kitchen trash drawstring bags, which is the predominant bags that people buy, that can make a big impact.
So, Nick, you tell them this. They say, oh, wow, didn't know that. And then you follow up and say, well, aren't you glad I told you? They roll their eyes.
I have that line. That is perfect.
Nick, I thought you were going to say you had done that already. Okay.
Oh, no. That's great.
So perhaps despite your eye roll, they'll still buy it, right?
You're telling me Glad you guys don't make that joke to each other all the time?
Oh, it's an internal thing. I countless emails with, aren't you glad? Or I'm glad you said that.
Okay. So, Nick, listeners want to find out more. Where do they go to learn more about Glad and its efforts around recycled content and sustainability generally?
Sure. So we're going to have a lot more content coming out on traditional channels like YouTube, and other digital partners, as well as national information coming soon. But today, if they want to go to glad.com/sustainability, they can learn more from our website.
Excellent. Well, Nick, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to share so much about this topic that, truthfully, I didn't know much about. I don't think our listeners might know all that much about either. Just how many factors go into what seems like a simple product and all of the steps Glad is taking behind the scenes to make sure that the products it puts forward are as impactful as possible. So thank you again for joining us. We loved having you on, and we are going to think of you every time we strike up conversation with the poor person standing next to us in the trash bag aisle at the grocery store. So Nick, thanks again.
Jay, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today and helping us tell our story.
All right, Scott, I wouldn't say that I'm glad this episode is ending, but I do have to ask you, as one of the architects of these intro notes, how much of these intro notes were recycled content?
Well, Jay, this might be the one instance where having 100% virgin material is a good thing. But I will say, Jay, we're about to do our thank yous. This is recycled content because we tend to thank a lot of the same people. But that's okay because we have consistency. We have a team.
Maybe folks that use this episode as research for the future, their future pieces of research or citations will have some portion of recycled content coming from this episode.
There you go.
We'll think of it that way. Okay, and so Scott, before we wrap up this episode, I do want to plug our giveaway that we've got coming up. So, Definers, Scott and I, truly it's one of our favorite things to hear about the impacts that our podcast has on your lives. I think that's how we, beyond just looking at download counts, measure our own impact. And so it's always so satisfying when we get stories from Definers who say, hey, this episode helped me do this, or that episode helped me do that. We are wanting to get more of that. We want to share those stories. We want to just encourage more folks to use the podcast to have that better impact in their own lives. So here's how it's going to go. Definers, if you share a story or a blurb on how this podcast, whether in general or perhaps a specific episode, led you to create a more sustainable action in your own life, share a blurb about that story and tag us. We're looking for posts on Instagram and LinkedIn. If you don't have those, you can email it to us directly. And do that, tag us. We will enter you into a chance to win a free Sustainability Defined coffee mug. And Scott, who does not want a Sustainability Defined podcast mug?
Yeah, and I will say the email is hosts, HOSTS, @sustainabilitydefined.com.
Excellent. So listeners, we'll come back with more on that next month. But in the meantime, we do, of course, want to thank the team of people that helped us put this episode together. First, we'd like to thank Amelia Kovach for all of her heavy lifting behind this episode's intro notes. We'd also like to thank Keaton Butler for all the audio editing wizardry she does on the back end. And of course, our usual thank you to Square Peg, Round Hole, and Potions for the music we used in this episode.
And we also want to thank Taylor Hesse at Weber Shandwick, who was very helpful helping us coordinate with the GLAD team and get this episode done in time. So the last thing we want to do is encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe to Sustainability Defined at Apple Podcasts. It really does help us get the word out when people subscribe and review. And as our loyal listeners know, a little incentive is that we do read a review each episode from someone who's posted recently. So we've gotten a couple here, Jay. This is the first time in a while we've picked for more than one, huh?
Yes, this is a great position to be in.
And the winner, I guess we could say this time, is capital L, capital X, space AH, LXA. Interesting. February 5th, 2022. He titled it, who knows, Integrity, Knowledge, and Style. This podcast is like the people I want as friends. It's smart, honest, and hip. As a sustainability consultant since 2009, I know the easy drift toward preachiness and doom. You won't find that here. Listen if you want to have podcast friends who are knowledgeable, modest, and looking for the greater good. Thank you, ! LXA. You shouldn't have. Thank you. She said we're hip, Jay. Or he said hip. I don't know whatever gender. We're hip.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Scott. I'm going to walk with an extra pep in my step for the rest of the day. I don't know if I've been called hip ever, and I am loving it.
And modest is nice too. I mean, I like to think we are. We don't know everything. We're trying our best here. So I'm glad that comes across as well.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thanks again, Lexa.
Oh, Lexa. That I don't know why. Not LXA. Lexa, sure. All right.
Or Alexa, like Alexa. I don't know.
Oh,
the
interesting.
mystery remains.
Well, I hope this person reaches out to connects with me on LinkedIn and UJ too, so we can thank this person. All right, Jay. I think that about does it. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
And I'm Jay Siegel. We will see you next time.